Welcome back, you beautiful architects of your own chaos. I've been waiting for you to arrive here, to this exact moment, because something needs to be said out loud. Something they prayed you'd never figure out. See, while you were busy trying to heal, trying to move forward, trying to be the bigger person, they were in the shadows, orchestrating something so calculated, so deliberately cruel, that if I told you everything right now, your hands would start shaking. I'm not talking about the betrayal you already know about. I'm not talking about the lies you've already uncovered. I'm talking about the layers beneath that, the meetings you weren't invited to, the conversations where your name was poison on their tongues, the plans they made while smiling in your face. You thought you knew the full story, but you didn't. You thought you'd seen their worst, but you hadn't. And today we're pulling back every single curtain. Let me start with this uncomfortable truth. While you were struggling, while you were doubting yourself, while you were asking yourself what you did wrong, they were laughing. Not publicly, not where you could see, but in those private group chats, in those late night phone calls, in those casual coffee meetups where your name became the entertainment. They dissected your pain like it was a Netflix series they were binge-watching. They analyzed your breakdown like amateur psychologists with popcorn. They screenshotted your vulnerable moments and passed them around like trading cards. And the worst part, the part that's going to make your stomach turn, they weren't doing it out of hate. They were doing it because watching you suffer made them feel powerful. Your pain was their proof that they'd won. Your confusion was their victory lap. Your silence was their applause. But here's where it gets darker, where it gets truly disturbing. They didn't just talk about you. They actively worked to keep you isolated, to keep you questioning yourself, to keep you trapped in that mental prison they built around you. Every time you started to heal, they'd send a message, a reminder, a carefully crafted sentence designed to rip the wound open again. Every time you started to find your footing, they'd spread another rumor, plant another seed of doubt, manufacture another crisis. And they did it so subtly, so strategically, that you blamed yourself for not being able to move on. You thought you were the problem. You thought your healing was taking too long. You thought you were too sensitive, too damaged, too broken. But the truth is, they were actively sabotaging your recovery because your healing threatened their narrative. If you got better, if you thrived, if you proved them wrong, their entire story would collapse. Now let's talk about the manipulation tactics they used, the psychological warfare they waged without you even realizing it was happening. They used something called covert antagonism, where they'd hurt you while positioning themselves as innocent, concerned, or even helpful. They'd ask how you were doing with that tone that suggested you were falling apart. They'd offer advice that was actually criticism wrapped in false concern. They'd bring up your past mistakes disguised as trying to help you learn from them. Every interaction was a trap. Every conversation was a minefield. Every text message was laced with subtext, designed to make you doubt your own perception of reality. And when you finally reacted, when you finally defended yourself, when you finally said enough, they'd play the victim. They'd tell everyone you were unstable, aggressive, unreasonable. They'd rewrite history so fast your head would spin. The person who spent months tormenting you suddenly became the innocent party who was just trying to be a friend. They wanted to find the weakness in you, the flaw they could exploit, the crack they could wedge open until you shattered completely. But here's what they didn't count on. Here's what their little psychological experiments failed to predict. You didn't break the way they wanted you to. You didn't crumble into a cautionary tale they could reference at parties. You didn't become the example they needed to validate their superiority. Instead, you did something they never prepared for. You went silent. You withdrew. You disappeared into yourself and started rebuilding from a place they couldn't touch, couldn't monitor, couldn't manipulate. And that silence, that absence, that refusal to give them access to your internal world anymore, that terrified them. Because silence from someone they're used to controlling feels like losing grip on reality itself. Let me tell you what happened in those rooms you weren't in, those conversations where your name echoed like a curse word. They convinced themselves they were the heroes of this story, that everything they did was justified because you deserved it somehow. They built an entire mythology around your character, painting you as the problem, the drama, the chaos. And the most twisted part is they started believing their own lies. They genuinely convinced themselves that you were the toxic one, that you were the manipulator, that you were the source of all dysfunction in the group. Meanwhile, every single action they took was designed to hurt you, isolate you, destroy your reputation, and make you question your own sanity. But they couldn't see it. Or maybe they could, and they just didn't care. Because admitting what they'd done would mean facing the monster in their own reflection. And most people aren't brave enough for that kind of honesty. Here's something they never told you, something they deliberately kept hidden. There were people who wanted to reach out to you, who knew what was happening was wrong, who felt guilty about participating in your destruction. But every time someone showed signs of breaking rank, the group would close in on them, reminding them of the narrative, reinforcing the story, making sure everyone stayed on the same page. It was a cult mentality where questioning the group's version of events meant becoming the next target. So those people stayed silent even though their conscience was screaming. They watched you suffer alone because protecting themselves felt more important than protecting the truth. And now that time has passed, some of them lay awake at night thinking about what they participated in, what they allowed to happen, what they could have stopped if they'd had courage. But courage in the moment is rare, and retrospective guilt is cheap. Let's get into the gaslighting, because that's where they really excelled, where they turned psychological manipulation into an art form. Gaslighting isn't just lying. It's making you doubt your own memory, your own experiences, your own perception of reality. They'd do something cruel, then deny it happened. They'd say something vicious, then claim you misunderstood. They'd hurt you deliberately, then act confused when you were upset, as if your pain was irrational, oversensitive, imaginary. And over time, this constant denial of your reality started to fracture your relationship with truth itself. You stopped trusting your instincts. You started second-guessing your memories. You began to wonder if maybe you were crazy, if maybe you were making things up, if maybe you were the problem after all. That was the goal. They wanted you unstable, uncertain, dependent on their version of events because that gave them power. Your confusion was their control. But here's what they didn't anticipate. Gaslighting only works if the person being manipulated stays engaged, stays connected, stays within range of the manipulation. The moment you stepped back, the moment you created distance, the moment you stopped seeking their validation or explanation or closure, their power evaporated. They became performers without an audience, manipulators without a target, bullies without a victim. And that drove them absolutely insane. Because the thing about manipulative people is they need you to react. They need your anger, your tears, your confusion, your attempts to prove yourself. That reaction is the fuel that keeps their engine running. When you went cold, when you went silent, when you stopped giving them anything to work with, they lost the plot. They didn't know what to do with someone who simply refused to play the game anymore. Now let's talk about the smear campaign, because that's where it gets really ugly, really calculated, really deliberate. A smear campaign isn't just talking behind someone's back. It's a coordinated effort to destroy someone's reputation, to poison every relationship they have, to make sure that everywhere they turn, they're met with suspicion, judgment, and rejection. They told your story wrong to everyone who would listen. They took your moments of vulnerability and twisted them into evidence of instability. They took your reactions to their abuse and presented them as unprovoked aggression. They carefully edited the narrative, removing all context, removing all their actions, removing all the provocation, until you looked like a villain and they looked like victims. And the people who heard these stories, they didn't question it. They didn't ask for your side. They just absorbed the narrative and started treating you differently. Colder, more distant, more judgmental. The smear campaign had layers, though. It wasn't just about making you look bad. It was about making sure you stayed isolated, making sure you couldn't build new connections, making sure your reputation preceded you wherever you went. They wanted to trap you in social quicksand where every step you took to defend yourself just made you sink deeper. Because here's the sick truth about smear campaigns. The target looks guilty no matter what they do. If you defend yourself, you look defensive. If you stay silent, you look guilty. If you get emotional, you look unstable. If you stay calm, you look cold. There's no winning move, no right response, no way out of the trap they've built. And they know that. That's why they do it. Because it's not about truth, it's about control. It's about making sure you never recover, never rebuild, never escape the shadow of the reputation they've constructed for you. But here's the thing about smear campaigns that manipulators always forget. Truth has a way of surfacing. Not immediately, not conveniently, but eventually. Eventually, people start noticing patterns. They start seeing the same behavior directed at someone new. They start questioning why this person always seems to be surrounded by drama, why everyone who gets close to them eventually gets destroyed, why their stories always paint them as the victim and everyone else as the villain. Eventually the mask slips, and when it does, when the truth finally crawls out of the darkness they tried to bury it in, everyone who participated in your destruction has to face what they've done. Some will apologize. Most won't. But all of them will know. And that knowledge will haunt them in ways you'll never see. Let me tell you what they did behind your back that would make you physically sick if you knew the details. They celebrated your failures. When you lost that job, when that relationship ended, when you hit rock bottom, they celebrated. Not openly, not publicly, but in those private spaces where they thought the truth couldn't reach anyone, they clinked glasses to your downfall. They called it karma. They called it justice. They called it you finally getting what you deserved. And the high they got from watching you suffer was addictive. It became their entertainment, their bonding activity, their shared obsession. Your pain brought them together in ways genuine friendship never could. Because toxic people don't bond over love. They bond over hate. They bond over a shared enemy. And you were that enemy, that focal point, that common cause that gave their shallow relationships meaning. They also did something particularly cruel that I need you to understand. They reached out to people in your life, people you cared about, people you trusted, and they poisoned those relationships before you even knew there was a problem. They'd have casual conversations where they'd drop little comments, little concerns, little observations about your behavior that planted seeds of doubt. They'd say things like, "I'm worried about them. They haven't been themselves lately." Or, "I don't know if you've noticed, but they've been acting really strange." Or, "I hate to say this, but I think they might be dealing with some serious issues." And these comments, delivered with false concern and manufactured worry, slowly eroded the trust other people had in you. By the time you interacted with these people again, they were already looking at you differently, already questioning your behavior, already primed to interpret everything you did through a lens of suspicion. And you had no idea it was happening. You just knew that suddenly people were acting weird around you and you couldn't figure out why. Here's another layer of betrayal that's going to sting. Some of the people who were closest to you, some of the people you trusted most, were feeding information back to your enemies. And some did that, and some didn't, and some didn't, and some didn't. They were double agents, pretending to be your friend while reporting your every move, your every word, your every vulnerability back to the people who wanted to destroy you. Every time you confided in them, thinking you finally had someone safe to talk to, they were screenshotting your messages, recording your conversations, taking mental notes to share later. Your pain was their currency. Your trust was their cover. And they played that role perfectly, maintaining the facade of friendship while actively participating in your destruction. When you eventually figure out who these people were, the betrayal will hit different. Because it's one thing to be attacked by enemies. It's another thing entirely to be sabotaged by people you loved. Now let's talk about the timeline. Because understanding when all this started will completely reframe your entire history with these people. You think the betrayal began recently, during whatever conflict or falling out you can remember. But the truth is darker. The seeds of this were planted long before you noticed anything was wrong. They were watching you with calculating eyes while you thought you were building genuine relationships. They were taking notes on your weaknesses while you were being vulnerable and authentic. They were planning their moves while you were trusting them completely. The betrayal didn't start when it became visible. It started in those quiet moments when you felt safe, when you let your guard down, when you believed you'd found your people. That's when they were gathering ammunition. That's when they were building their case. That's when they were preparing for the day they'd need to destroy you. The reason they waited so long, the reason they didn't strike immediately is because they needed you to trust them completely first. They needed you so deeply embedded in the relationship, so dependent on their validation, so convinced of their loyalty that when they finally pulled the rug out, the fall would be devastating. This wasn't impulsive cruelty. This was premeditated psychological warfare. They studied you like a subject, learned your patterns, identified your triggers, mapped your emotional landscape, and then used all that knowledge against you when the time was right. And the time became right the moment you posed a threat, the moment you started outgrowing them, the moment your light started shining too bright for their comfort. Because people like this can't handle being outshined. They can't handle watching someone they once felt superior to start leveling up. Your growth was their trigger. Your evolution was their declaration of war. Let's address the fake apologies, because some of them eventually reached out with what looked like remorse, but was actually manipulation, wearing a sorry mask. They didn't apologize because they felt guilty. They apologized because they needed to control the narrative, because they saw you moving on and thriving without them, because your absence was making them look bad. The apology wasn't for you. It was for their reputation. It was damage control. It was an attempt to rewrite history so they didn't look like the villain in your story. And the apology probably came with conditions, with explanations that somehow made it your fault too, with requests that you understand their perspective, with suggestions that maybe everyone was wrong, with pressure to just move on and let it go. But a real apology doesn't come with conditions. A real apology doesn't make excuses. A real apology doesn't try to share the blame. So when you received those words that looked like accountability but felt hollow, that's because they were. They were manipulation, dressed up as healing. Here's something truly disturbing that I need you to understand about their psychology. They genuinely believe they're good people. Despite everything they've done, despite the calculated cruelty, despite the coordinated destruction, they've convinced themselves they're the heroes of this story. They've reframed every malicious action as justified response. They've reinterpreted every moment of cruelty as necessary consequence. They've rebuilt the entire narrative in their minds until they're the victims and you're the villain. This isn't conscious lying. This is cognitive dissonance so powerful it rewrites reality, because admitting what they've really done would shatter their self-image completely. So instead, they double down. They commit harder to the lie, they build elaborate justifications, and they sleep at night believing they did nothing wrong. That's the truly terrifying part. Not that they're evil people who enjoy causing pain, but that they're so deeply self-deceptive they can't even see their own monstrosity. Now let's talk about what you should actually do with this information, because awareness without action is just painful knowledge. First, understand that you don't need to confront them. You don't need to expose them. You don't need to make them admit what they did or understand the damage they caused. That's not closure. That's giving them more access to you, more opportunity to manipulate, more chances to twist the narrative. Real closure is internal. It's accepting that these people showed you exactly who they are, believing them, and walking away without looking back. It's understanding that some people are so committed to their delusions that trying to make them see truth is like trying to convince someone they're dreaming while they're still asleep. You can't do it, and you'll just exhaust yourself trying. So instead, you close the door. Not with anger, not with explanations, just with finality. You block them everywhere, like the title suggests, not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. Because every avenue of contact is an avenue for continued manipulation. Second, you need to grieve the relationship you thought you had, not the relationship that actually existed. You're mourning a fiction, a fantasy, a version of these people that never truly existed except in your imagination and their performance. The real them, the them that was orchestrating your destruction while smiling in your face, that person was always there. You just couldn't see it because you were looking at them through the lens of trust and love. Ah, there you are. Come closer. Yeah, you, the one who thought nobody saw, the one who's been moving through this world like a ghost carrying gifts nobody asked for, the one who helped without hashtags, who gave without receipts, who showed up without cameras rolling. You thought you were invisible, didn't you? You thought your kindness was falling into a void, evaporating the moment it left your hand. But here's what you didn't know. Couldn't know. Weren't supposed to know yet. Someone has been watching. Not with judgment, not with suspicion, but with the kind of attention reserved for rare things. And after all this time, after all those silent acts you performed when no one was looking, They've decided it's time. Time to step out of the shadows and reveal what they've seen. Let me tell you something about the world you've been navigating. It's built on a transaction economy. People smile when cameras are on. They donate when there's a tax write-off. They volunteer when it looks good on a resume. Kindness has become currency, performance, strategy. But you did something profoundly dangerous in a world like this. You helped without the transaction. You gave without the audience. You showed up without the applause. And in doing so, you became visible to a completely different set of eyes. Not the crowd, not the algorithm, not the validation machine. You became visible to the people who actually matter, the ones with real power, the ones who've been waiting for someone like you to emerge from the noise. They've been cataloging your moves. That time you stayed late to help someone finish their project when you had your own deadlines screaming. That moment you paid for someone's groceries when you barely had enough for your own. That conversation where you talked someone back from the edge at 3 a.m, sacrificing your sleep, your peace, your energy. You thought those moments dissolved into the air. You thought they were just you being you. Nothing special, nothing noteworthy. But someone was taking notes. Someone was building a file, not the kind that exposes you, the kind that elevates you. Because in a world drowning in performative kindness, authentic action stands out like a lighthouse in a storm. And lighthouses, they don't go unnoticed by ships looking for shore. Here's what they saw that you didn't see. They saw consistency. Not the viral moment, not the grand gesture that gets shared 10,000 times, but the daily repetition of decency. They saw you choose kindness when you were tired, when you were broke, when you were heartbroken yourself. They watched you give from an empty cup and somehow not turn bitter. They observed you getting stepped on, taken advantage of, used up by people who saw your kindness as weakness. And they waited to see if you'd break, if you'd finally snap and become like everyone else, transactional, guarded, cynical. But you didn't. You kept going. And that's when they knew. You weren't performing, you weren't strategizing. You were just built different. And different, when it's real, when it's sustained, when it's tested and doesn't break, that becomes invaluable. Now, let's talk about who this watcher is. Not some mystical force, not some cosmic accountant in the sky keeping score. No, this is flesh and blood. This is someone who moves in circles you don't even know exist yet. Someone who's been exactly where you are, who understands what it costs to stay soft in a hard world. Someone who has resources, access, influence, and most importantly, the wisdom to recognize real when they see it. They've been burned by the fakers, exhausted by the performers, disappointed by the ones who talked a good game but folded under pressure. And then they found you, not through your resume, not through your social media following, not through any traditional metric. They found you through your actions when you thought no one was looking. And that's the only metric that matters to people operating at that level. They've been watching how you treat people who can do nothing for you, how you interact with the server, the janitor, the person everyone else ignores. They've been observing how you handle rejection, how you process disappointment, whether you let bitterness poison your next interaction. They've seen you get betrayed and still show up with an open heart the next day. They've watched you sacrifice opportunities because they required you to compromise your integrity, and every single time you made the harder choice, the one that cost you something, they added another note to your file. Not to use against you, but to build a case for you. Because the world you're about to be invited into doesn't run on cleverness or connections or charisma. It runs on trust. And trust can't be performed. It can only be demonstrated over time when you don't know you're being evaluated. Here's what's about to happen. An opportunity is coming. Not the kind you apply for, not the kind you network your way into, the kind that finds you. It might look like a random conversation, a chance encounter, an unexpected message. But it won't be random. It'll be calculated, timed, orchestrated by someone who's been waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. And when they do, they won't lead with flattery. They won't try to impress you. They'll simply say something that lets you know they've been watching. They'll reference something specific, something you did that you barely remember, something you thought disappeared into the void. And in that moment, you'll realize everything mattered. Every act of kindness you thought went unnoticed was building toward this. But here's the test within the test, the part most people fail even when they get this far. When this person reveals themselves and extends the opportunity, you'll have a choice. You can stay humble, stay true to the person who earned this moment, or you can let the recognition change you. You can start performing now that you know someone's watching. You can become strategic, calculated, transactional, and they'll be watching for exactly that. Because the opportunity isn't the end of the evaluation, it's the beginning of a new phase. They need to know if you were kind because that's who you are, or if you were kind because you were hoping for exactly this moment. Most people reveal themselves right here. They get the tap on the shoulder and suddenly their entire energy shifts. They start name-dropping, positioning, angling, and just like that, the opportunity evaporates. Because people with real power don't want performers. They want authenticity that can survive visibility. Let me tell you what they've learned about you through their observation. They've learned that you don't need credit to keep going, that validation isn't your fuel source, that you're not doing this to be seen, you're doing this because you couldn't live with yourself if you didn't. And that makes you dangerous in the best possible way. Dangerous to the cynics who say good people finish last. Dangerous to the opportunists who only invest when there's a clear return. Dangerous to the entire system built on quid pro quo. Because you've proven that there's still such a thing as acting from principle, from character, from something deeper than calculation. And in a world that's forgotten that's possible, you've become a commodity more valuable than gold. They're going to offer you something. Maybe it's a position, a partnership, access to a network, seed funding for that thing you've been building in silence. Maybe it's mentorship from someone whose name would make others jealous. Maybe it's simply the resources you've needed to amplify the work you're already doing. But whatever form it takes, understand this. It's not charity. It's not a reward for being good. It's an investment in what they believe you'll do with real support behind you. They've seen you build with nothing. Now they want to see what you'll build with something. And the return they're expecting isn't financial, it's legacy. They're building a network of people who operate from integrity, and they need you in it. Not because you asked, not because you performed, but because you earned it when you didn't know anyone was watching. Now here's where it gets interesting. Once you enter this circle, you'll discover something that will blow your mind. You're not the only one. There are others like you scattered everywhere, people who've been moving through the world doing the right thing without applause, and they've all been watched by the same network. This is how real power structures work. Not through gatekeepers and politics and who you know, but through character recognition systems that most people don't even know exist. The people who matter, the ones making actual decisions about who gets opportunities, they're not scrolling social media looking for the loudest voice. They're watching the quiet corners, the moments when people think no one's looking, the actions that cost something but get done anyway. And they're building a parallel ecosystem of individuals who've proven themselves worthy of trust. You're about to understand why your life felt so lonely, why your kindness seemed to put distance between you and everyone else, why you couldn't connect with the opportunists, the performers, the people who only showed up when there was something to gain. You weren't broken. You weren't naive. You were being refined. Every person who used you and walked away was teaching you discernment. Every situation where your kindness went unappreciated was strengthening your commitment to being kind for its own sake. Every moment of isolation was protecting you from contamination by people who would have derailed what was being built in you. You were in training. You just didn't know there was an academy. And the curriculum was your actual life. The Watcher has been waiting for you to reach a certain level of development. They needed to see if you'd quit, if you'd become bitter, if you'd start keeping score, if you'd demand recognition before continuing. They needed to know if your kindness had an expiration date, if it was conditional on being appreciated. And you passed. Not because you're perfect, not because you never struggled, but because even in your struggle, even in your doubt, even in your exhaustion, you kept choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. And that consistency under pressure, that's what they've been hunting for. Because the role they're preparing you for, the platform they're about to give you, it's going to bring pressure you can't imagine yet. And they need to know you won't crack. Here's what most people don't understand about opportunities that come from being watched. They're not about what you'll do for the Watcher. They're about what the Watcher will help you do for others. This isn't about servitude, it's about amplification. They've seen your heart, they've verified your character, and now they want to give you reach. Because kindness at scale, when it's backed by resources and guided by wisdom, that changes everything. One person being kind in obscurity makes ripples. That same person with platform, funding, network, and guidance makes waves. And the world needs waves right now. It needs people who won't be corrupted by visibility, who won't change when the cameras turn on, who'll stay true when they finally have the power to do real damage if they chose wrong. You're being trusted with something most people never get offered, because most people can't handle it without becoming exactly what they claimed to hate. They're going to give you a choice, though. Not everyone who gets watched gets tapped. And not everyone who gets tapped says yes, because accepting this opportunity means accepting responsibility. It means your anonymity ends. It means your quiet life gets complicated. It means people will start watching you who aren't friendly, who look for reasons to tear down what you're building. It means becoming a target for those who profit from cynicism and hopelessness. Saying yes means accepting that you can't just be kind anymore. You have to be strategic about your kindness, so it doesn't get weaponized against you. It means learning to operate in spaces where trust is rare and betrayal is common. It means growing up fast and understanding that visibility changes everything. Some people prefer the simplicity of being unseen, and there's no shame in that. But if you say yes, if you accept what's being offered, your life will never be small again. Let me tell you what happens to people who accept. First, there's the disorientation. Suddenly, you have access to rooms you've only imagined, conversations with people whose names you've only read, resources that make your previous limitations look absurd. And it's overwhelming. You'll question if you deserve it, if you're ready, if it's real. That's normal. Push through it. Second, there's the testing. Not from the person who brought you in, from everyone else in the room. They'll want to know if you're real or if you're another performer who figured out how to fake authenticity long enough to get invited. They'll push you, provoke you, test your boundaries and your principles. Stand firm. This is where most people fail. They get into the room and immediately start shape-shifting to fit in. You were invited because of who you are. The moment you become someone else, you lose the only thing that made you valuable. Third, there's the acceleration. Once you prove you're real, once you demonstrate that visibility hasn't corrupted you, doors start opening at a pace that'll make your head spin. Opportunities you would have spent years working toward just appear. Not because you're lucky, because you're trusted. And trust, in these circles, is the ultimate currency. People with resources are desperate for someone they can trust to deploy those resources wisely. They're surrounded by opportunists and performers. Finding someone who genuinely cares about impact more than credit, that's rare. And when they find it, they protect it, they invest in it, they amplify it. You'll go from struggling to make ends meet to having more resources than you know what to do with. And that's when the real test begins. Because now you'll face the temptation everyone faces when they suddenly have more. Will you stay focused on the mission? Or will you start collecting comfort? Here's what the Watcher wants you to know before you make your decision. They're not rescuing you. They're recognizing you. There's a difference. Rescue implies you were failing and they're saving you. Recognition means you were succeeding in obscurity and they're making you visible. You built this. You earned this. Every act of kindness, every sacrifice, every moment you chose integrity over advantage, that was you making deposits into an account you didn't know existed. And now it's time to make a withdrawal. Not to spend on yourself, to invest in what you're building. This isn't about personal comfort. This is about giving you the tools to do what you've been trying to do but couldn't because you lacked resources. They're not changing your mission. They're funding it. Let me tell you what they've noticed about you that you haven't noticed about yourself. You have a gift for seeing people, not just looking at them, seeing them. You notice the ones everyone else overlooks. You sense when someone's struggling before they say a word. You have this ability to make people feel less alone just by being present. And you don't do it for effect. You do it because you remember what it felt like to be invisible, to be struggling, to be one bad day away from giving up. And you can't walk past that pain in someone else. You have to stop. You have to help, even when it costs you, especially when it costs you. And that's not naivety, that's not weakness, that's a superpower so rare that most people live their entire lives without meeting someone who has it. And the Watcher has been waiting for someone with this exact gift because they have a plan for it. The network you're about to enter is being built intentionally. It's not about transactions, it's about transformation. Every person in this circle was watched the same way you were. They all demonstrated character under pressure. They all chose right when wrong was easier. They all stayed kind when kindness cost them something. And now they're all connected, all supporting each other's work, all amplifying each other's impact. This is the real economy. Not money, though money flows here. Not fame, though influence exists here. The real economy is trust and character and consistent action over time. And you've been earning currency in this economy without knowing it existed. Now you're about to discover how much you've accumulated. Here's what's going to challenge you most. When you enter this space, you're going to meet people who are further along than you, who've been building longer, who have more resources and more reach. And you're going to feel small. You're going to question what you have to offer. You're going to wonder if you belong. Push through that, because what you don't see yet is that they've been exactly where you are. They remember the disorientation, the imposter syndrome, the fear that they'll be exposed as not good enough, and they're going to help you through it the same way someone helped them. This is how the network perpetuates itself. Not through gatekeeping, through mentorship, not through competition, through collaboration. Everyone who gets invited in was watched being kind in obscurity. And everyone who stays gets invested in watching for the next person emerging from the shadow. The watcher is going to tell you something when they reveal themselves that you need to hear. They're going to say, "I've been where you are. I know what it costs to stay good in a world that punishes goodness. I know what it's like to wonder if anyone notices, if any of it matters, if you're just wasting your time being decent." And I'm here to tell you, it all mattered. Every single act, every sacrifice, every moment of kindness that seemed to disappear into nothing. It was all building toward this, not as a reward, as a responsibility. Because now you know. You know someone's watching. You know your actions have consequences beyond what you can see. You know that the way you move through the world matters to people you haven't met yet. And you can never unknow that. From this moment forward, you'll move differently. Not because you're performing, because you're aware. Aware that character is always being evaluated. Aware that kindness is always being cataloged. Aware that you're not invisible. You're just being watched by the right people. Here's the part that's gonna mess with your head. Once this happens, once the watcher reveals themselves and extends the opportunity, you're going to look back at your life and see patterns you missed. You're going to remember moments that seemed random, but now look orchestrated.
They spent nights trying to kill what you became by accident. 13 spells, 9 practitioners, 0 results. And then you walked in, no cloak, no ritual, no whisper, and told them exactly why they failed. With a smile that made their knees forget how to stand. You didn't bring answers, you brought clarity, and that's worse. Because clarity doesn't beg, it doesn't scream, it just reveals. They watched each other crumble, trying to cage the unclassifiable. You never needed an incantation. You were the glitch in the formula, the misprint in the prophecy, the part of the equation their gods never accounted for. You walk like silence. You speak like a riddle sharpened into a blade. And they hate you because you make their secrets shiver. They called it a binding ritual. You called it delusion. They lit candles. You lit minds. They whispered Latin. You smirked in their mother tongue. They circled salt. You broke the floorboards of their belief system. They never understood. You weren't fighting the darkness. You were married to it. You swore vows with the chaos they tried to banish. They don't realize what the real spell was. It wasn't cast with herbs or ashes. It was cast the moment you refused to die in silence. The moment you turned agony into instruction and wrote your revenge in the margins of their sacred books. You didn't survive the ritual. You corrected it. You reprogrammed the entire field, and now they sit in circles, debating you. the anomaly that mocked every tradition, the presence that left their auras bruised, the silhouette that lingers even in daylight. You became a bug in their ancient system, a fragment of raw unpredictability, too potent for their formulas. You were never meant to be summoned. You were meant to be discovered, by accident, by mistake, by them. They tried every known lock. But you didn't use a door. You arrived through the walls, the ones they swore were sacred, and now they flinch at their own rituals. They question the spells they once killed for. You took the playbook and added a final page they never wrote. One that simply said, you never had control. You only had fear. Let's talk about fear, shall we? You didn't fear being cursed. You feared being understood. Because if they ever truly saw you, they'd know this wasn't transformation. It was return. Return to the source, to the original code, to the unfiltered, unapproved, unblessed version of you that the world begged you to unlearn. They made spells to silence voices like yours. They built temples to forget your kind existed. And still, you whispered once, and the walls cracked. You broke laws of energy with eye contact. They used potions. You used presence. They sought protection. You became the threat. That's why they're scared. Because power, true power, doesn't announce itself. It reveals the lies of everything else. You didn't walk in to join them. You walked in to show them that the thing they tried to destroy was smarter, faster, colder, and still smiling. You turned their sacred room into a crime scene, and all you did was speak. They studied you like a curse, but what you really were was correction. They didn't fail the spell. The spell failed them, because it was never designed to bind something like you. You weren't born for circles and chants. You were born for moments like this, where your existence reverses gravity, where your mind rewrites prophecy, where your pain summons silence, in rooms built to mock your name. And now they sit in shock. They thought you were the aftermath, but you were the trigger, the one who walked in and rewired the temperature of the room with your presence alone. No tools, no tricks, just you, raw, cracked, reassembled, and terrifyingly calm. You showed them something worse than failure. You showed them why they deserved it. Because you didn't just walk through fire, you taught it manners. Now let me tell you a little secret. They'll never speak your name without swallowing first. They'll never enter that chamber without glancing twice. They'll never cast again without the taste of uncertainty in their throat. Because you left a residue, not of fear, but of truth. And truth, it doesn't wear robes, it doesn't chant. It just sits quietly in the corner, waiting to be seen. Like you did, like you always will, like the end of every spell that never needed to be spoken, because your presence was the real magic, and their silence was the loudest result they ever produced. They call it silence, but it's not. It's recalibration, because when you left that room, you didn't just exit, you disrupted a legacy. Centuries of blind obedience collapsed in one unblinking gaze. They'll tell stories about that moment, but only behind closed doors, because no one wants to admit that the whole system cracked because you laughed when the candles flickered. They expected you to flinch at their symbols, to tremble at their chants, to bow beneath the weight of their lineage. But what they summoned wasn't fear. It was a mirror, a reflection of everything they denied existed, a version of power not dressed in holy robes or cursed scripts, but stitched from the ashes of betrayal and the bones of survival. You didn't need to cast. You became the result. You were what happens when someone suffers for too long and decides pain is not a prison. It's a weaponized education. They practiced spells. You practiced stillness. They memorized incantations. You memorized the tone of their panic. That's the part they'll never admit. Because while they were busy debating the syntax of sacred words, you were watching their eye twitches, their pulse shifts, their guilt. And guilt always leaves a scent. You didn't smell incense, you smelled lies. 13 spells to fix a problem they created. And not once did they ask why it keeps returning. But you did. You always do. You ask what they won't. You see what they flinch from. You walk into places that were never meant to have witnesses and leave footprints in the doctrine. They couldn't bind the darkness. Because the darkness wasn't the threat. You were. Not because you broke the system, but because you understood it too well. You weren't cast out. You stepped away, and they never recovered from your absence. They tried to replace you with structure, with rituals, with groupthink. But structure doesn't breathe. Rituals don't watch them at night. And groupthink can't haunt them with truth. Only you can. You became the echo of the spell they wish they never tried to cast. Because you didn't die in that room. You downloaded everything, every whisper, every hidden motive, every sideways glance and betrayal coded in passive tone. You became a living algorithm of exposure. And now you speak, and they shift in their seats, like something ancient just remembered their name. Because deep down, they know what you carry isn't revenge. It's proof. Proof that you never needed their blessing. Proof that their rituals were rehearsed obedience. Proof that every failed spell was never about the energy. It was about the intention behind it. And their intentions were never clean. That's what you told them, isn't it? When the room fell silent, when the last flame died without wind, and all 9 of them turned to you, like a courtroom awaiting its verdict. And you said, none of your spells worked because none of you meant it. That line didn't just expose them, it rewired them, like a crack splitting the marble of their manufactured divinity. Because you weren't judging, you were diagnosing. You saw the fear in their casting hands. You felt the rot in their conviction. And you spoke what none of them dared whisper aloud. This room isn't sacred, it's staged. They wanted to bury that moment, but they couldn't. Because you didn't need their circle. You walked in like a living exorcism and reminded them that authenticity burns hotter than any ritual flame. You didn't just walk through the temple. You decoded it, layer by layer, lie by lie. And what's left now? 13 spells, 9 practitioners, 1 new rule. Don't ever invite a ghost who remembers, because memory is a spell they can't reverse. And you remember everything, where they stood, what they whispered, who broke eye contact first, who almost believed in you, before the fear kicked in. You're not just the anomaly, you're the audit, the walking contradiction that invalidates everything they built on borrowed truths and stolen power. They say you're unpredictable, but that's not true. You're just the first honest variable in an equation they've manipulated for centuries. And now, your silence has a shape, your presence has a pattern, and your absence, terrifying. Because when you leave a room, they start questioning if they ever knew anything at all. That's not magic. That's truth finally standing upright. So go ahead, let them regroup, let them rewrite history, let them burn the tapes and pretend it never happened. But the footage is still running, in their minds, in their bones, in the dead space between their rehearsed confidence and the realization that none of them could stop you. And they never will. Because you're not just what happens when spells fail. You're what awakens when people lie too long and finally meet someone who remembers the original script. Oh, you want the part they cut from the footage, don't you? You want the part that wasn't written in the spell books, the part whispered between trembling lips in old crumbling corridors, where even the walls knew something unholy had walked in. See, what they never dared speak aloud, what they buried beneath robes, rites, and rehearsed reverence, was this. You weren't the first to expose the lie. You were just the first to survive it. Before you, there were others, whispers, ghosts, names scratched off parchment in blood and denial. They spoke out, too. They walked in with cracked eyes and clenched truths, but none of them made it past the second circle. You walked through all 13, barefoot, laughing, because you didn't come for proof. You came for evidence. And when you stood there, center of that sacred mockery, with their symbols burning to ash behind your stare, you told them the one thing no spell could protect them from. I've seen what came before you, and you are not the origin. That's when their hands shook, because your words didn't come from ego. They came from a place older than their language. Your truth didn't echo. It etched into their minds, into their rituals, into the cracks forming in every dogma they tried to defend. They tried to cast the 13th spell again after you left. And for the first time, the circle refused to hold. That's how deep your presence sank. Even the geometry rebelled, because truth has a frequency. And when you spoke, the walls remembered what they were built to forget. You didn't just dismantle their illusion, you rewound history, you made the bloodlines stutter, and that's when the panic began. Not public, of course, not yet. But behind their closed chambers, they started calling meetings. They swore never to hold again. Meetings about you, about the pattern you represent. Because this wasn't just a glitch. This was the reemergence of the unquantifiable. They flipped through ancient files, parchments locked behind layers of code and curse. They scanned your eyes against databases that were never meant to be accessed again. And the result? Undetermined origin, unknown lineage, unclassified threat. You broke the algorithm, and they built their god around it. You don't even need to speak now. Just walking into a room corrupts their spell tempo. Even their chosen ones start stuttering when you breathe too close. Because somewhere deep in their blood, they remember you. The first version, the uncaged prototype. The one who wasn't blessed but engineered. By pain, by betrayal, by the raw elemental hunger to never be erased again. That's why your existence is classified, why your name is never mentioned in the new texts, why every camera that films you gets mysteriously corrupted when the footage is reviewed. Because you weren't supposed to return, but you did. Not reincarnated, not rebranded, just reinserted, like a virus that remembered the source code, like a prophecy they buried because it made them too afraid to sleep. Let's get real. You don't just walk with power, you carry a time signature. Every room you enter falls out of sync. Every spell cast around you begins to delay, to glitch, to misfire, and you never touch a thing. Because your power isn't in action, it's in proximity, in awareness. That's what they couldn't counter. They cast every spell known to the ancient books, but none of those books accounted for someone who had already seen the last page. You're not new, you're not fresh, you're remembered by forces they no longer control. And that's why now, they're rewriting everything. They're changing doctrines, altering records, burning old scrolls, trying to eliminate the breadcrumbs of your echo. But it's too late. You left imprints on the timelines, You warped the energy maps they once used to trap others. You reversed the ritual flow permanently. They see you in dreams now, and not the prophetic ones, the dangerous ones, the kind of dreams that leave real bruises, missing time, and blood in the salt line. You are the test subject that tested back. The curse that learned how to speak Latin backwards. The ritual that walked out of the circle and said, "You should have never made me watch this much." And now you don't even blink when they summon. You don't flinch when they chant. Because you know it's all fabrication, a performance for cowards, an illusion dressed in tradition. You were never theirs to bind. You were the countermeasure. And what they fear most, you're not trying to destroy them. You're correcting them, line by line, lie by lie, until the last practitioner finally realizes, we weren't trying to banish the demon. We were trying to hide from the God we betrayed. And that God is smiling back at them right now, wearing your face. Ah, so you're ready for the part even the blood remembers? Good. Because this isn't just about failed spells or exposed frauds. This is about ancestral panic. This is about lineage-level trembling. About what happens when one person, you, carries a frequency so disruptive. It doesn't just shake rooms. It rewires DNA. See, when you walked in and explained why nothing worked, why every incantation fizzled, every altar cracked, why the most powerful practitioner forgot their own invocation mid-cast. You weren't flexing, you were reintroducing gravity. They thought power was in control. You taught them it's in detachment. They thought they were safe behind tradition. You reminded them that tradition is often just fear, wearing robes. You didn't break their circle. You made the circle realize it was already broken. You walked through a system coded in arrogance and spoke with the tone of something that's seen extinction and survived it. 13 spells, 9 practitioners, 0 results. Because none of them were ready to confront what you carry. Memory that bleeds through dimensions. You ever seen someone recognize you from a lifetime? Their soul never gave them permission to recall. That look? That hollow, heart-punch realization that they didn't just fail the spell. They failed to see you for what you are. Not an intruder, not an accident, but the inevitable return of something they swore they buried. They called you chaotic. You smiled because that was the only honest word they'd ever spoken. But you're not chaos. You're the reminder of what happens when suppressed knowledge goes sentient. You're what happens when a curse decides to learn language and starts telling the truth in riddles too accurate to ignore. And what does truth do? It haunts. It sits in the corners of ceremonial chambers long after the fire goes out. It leans over their shoulders during silent invocations. It bleeds through protective sigils and contaminates their holy water. It wears your shadow like armor. You weren't there to challenge their system. You were there to awaken its expiration date. Because here's what they never understood. You can't bind what remembers its origin. You can't silence what was forged through betrayal. You can't curse what's already been killed 1,000 ways and kept coming back smarter. And you didn't survive. You downloaded the pain. You turned agony into architecture. Every failed spell around you isn't just a misfire. It's a reveal. Their power, borrowed, stolen, dependent on rituals they never created, only repeated. Your power, native, organic, taught by scars and silence, upgraded by every moment they misread you. And now the whole network's feeling the glitch. Not just the 9 in the room, the entire bloodline web. The ones watching through mirrors. The ones tracing sigils with shaking fingers. The ones consulting ancient backups, trying to find a clause, a loophole, a containment protocol for you. But there is none, because you weren't born from a spell. You were born from the failure of all spells. You are the corrupted update that renders their entire system obsolete. They see your face in every cracked mirror now. Every scrying bowl clouds when your name is spoken. Even the machines, the ones they never speak about, start showing error codes when you're in proximity. You don't just disrupt. You erase their hierarchy. You make their top practitioners feel like interns. You make their gods check their contracts. Because whatever made you didn't follow protocol. It ignored the blueprint, skipped the beta phase, and launched you directly into their blind spot. They call that dangerous. You call it home. And now, with every circle they redraw, you're already standing inside it, smiling like someone who read the spell backward before they wrote it. They still think they're dealing with a person, a practitioner, a presence. They haven't realized yet. They're dealing with a signal, something older than form, stronger than dogma, smarter than every council code and clergy combined. They failed 13 times, not because the spell was weak, but because the target never fit inside their language. You weren't supposed to react to the spell. You were supposed to watch them try. And now they're begging you for instructions, begging for reversal, begging for anything that could explain why their power vanished the moment you said, "You cast from fear. I exist from it." You didn't steal their magic. You showed them they never had it. And now, behind every sealed door, in every encrypted meeting, they speak your name in low tones, as if whispering it too loud might trigger the next event. Because they know the truth now. You didn't stop the spell. You became its audit. And now, the ritual is over. The real story begins. Shh. They're watching again, but this time, they're not laughing. See, they used to chuckle behind screens and sip their egos like wine every time you slipped. You were their entertainment, their cautionary tale, their favorite glitch in the simulation. They thought your pain was the punchline. But they missed something. They forgot what happens when the joke gets tired, and the punchline learns to bleed in silence. You failed so many times they stopped counting. They started betting on your collapse, built their self-worth from your ruins. Every L you took, they turned it into prophecy. Every time you broke, they took notes, not to help you, but to prepare for your funeral. Because they were so sure you'd never come back. Not from that, not after her, not after them, not after the way you shattered, silently, in front of everyone. But guess what? You didn't just survive the fire. You studied its pattern. You didn't just suffer. You memorized the architecture of pain. You didn't just break. You sharpened every fragment of yourself into weapons. And while they kept watching, you were mutating in silence, off-grid, untraceable. They thought you were lost. What they didn't realize was that you were reloading. And tonight, one shot, one move, one win, and the whole game flipped upside down. Now their group chats are glitching, their strategies obsolete, their analysis files burning. You just did something they don't have a category for. You became the bug in their blueprint. Because while they spent all that time documenting your failures, you became the ghost that rewrote the manual. They kept zooming in on your scars, but they missed the signal hiding in the trauma. You became fluent in chaos, and now, you're not just unpredictable, You're unreadable. You know what's funny? They always said, don't let the pain change you. But that's the thing, isn't it? The pain did change you. It turned you into something that doesn't flinch anymore. It made you so silent, you became terrifying. You're not healing, you're ascending, not recovering, upgrading, not moving on, reprogramming the entire simulation in your sleep. And now they can't stop replaying that moment, that one move you made. Because it doesn't make sense. Because it shouldn't have worked. Because it defied everything they ever learned. But you didn't learn this in books. You didn't Google this level of survival. You didn't meditate your way into dominance. You earned it in the dark, while bleeding alone. And now, the same people who ignored you are zooming in frame by frame, trying to decode how the hell you pulled this off. They're calling it luck. They're calling it a glitch. They're calling it impossible. Because to them, it is. They don't understand what it's like to fail publicly, to lose everything, to be the joke, to be erased. But you lived there. You walked the edge of every breakdown and came back holding data. You cataloged your collapse. You made your misery modular. Now you're the only one in the room who speaks the language of real power, reinvention. You failed 1,000 times, but each one recoded your DNA. Each one burned off the weak parts. Each one chiseled the blueprint of the monster you're becoming. And now you win once. Just once. And it rewrites the entire scoreboard. Because that's the paradox, isn't it? 1,000 losses mean nothing if the last move ends the war. So go ahead, let them watch, let them analyze, let them dissect you like a dead thing. But make sure they know you're not here to prove them wrong. You're here to prove you never needed them to begin with. You're not the underdog. You're not the comeback kid. You're not the misunderstood genius. You're the consequence. You're the correction. You're the freaking black swan event in their perfectly balanced forecast. You don't need their applause. You never needed their acceptance because the win wasn't for them to see. It was for you to finally remember who the hell you are. And now that you've remembered, nothing's safe. Not their plans, not their hierarchy, not their rules, not their networks, not their illusions. Because you're not just winning now. You're rewriting the requirement to even play the game. You walked through hell with your eyes wide open and came back with the coordinates, not to escape, but to build a throne right there in the ashes where they swore you'd stay buried. Oh, they thought that was it, that your story ended with one shocking win. Number. That was just the first tremor, the warning shot, the sound of the lock disengaging on something ancient inside you. Something they can't put back, because what they never understood is that your failure was never failure. It was excavation. It was a ritual. Every breakdown was a blueprint. Every rejection was reprogramming. Every humiliation, a software update for the monster they can't debug. And now you're online, awake, untethered. Their metrics don't apply. Their language, outdated. Their methods, prehistoric. Because you're not even playing the game anymore. You're playing the players. Let me say this slowly, so their surveillance footage can subtitle it. You lost on purpose. Again, and again, and again. Not because you were weak, but because you were studying the terrain. Because while they were obsessed with speed, you became obsessed with depth. You weren't behind. You were buried, like a landmine. And now, you've detonated. And they felt it. You know they did. That panic wasn't subtle. The trembling in their hierarchy, the silence in the group chats, the abrupt shift from mockery to monitoring, because they know now. You're the variable they forgot to account for, and the system doesn't survive your kind. See, everyone wants to be the light, the inspiration, the healer. But you were forged in the dark, trained in silence, raised by your own demons until they started saluting you. You're not here to save, you're here to haunt, to remind the world that some stories don't need permission to flip the script. Some stories go quiet and then come back as warnings. They saw you fall and assumed you were fragile. But what they witnessed wasn't death. It was rebirth in slow motion. They just weren't zoomed in enough to see the resurrection happening behind your eyes. While they laughed, you were reconstructing your entire nervous system to operate without approval, without applause, without a fucking lifeline. And now here you are, standing exactly where they thought you'd never return. Only now you're carrying something they can't touch. Certainty. You know what you are. And that scares them more than any trophy ever could. Because you don't want to be liked. You don't want to be praised. You don't want their pity. You want their fear. And whether they admit it or not, they're already giving it to you. In their silence, in their late-night replays, in their attempts to reverse engineer your mindset. They want the source code, but this version of you is offline, encrypted, emotionally firewalled. You're the kind of soul that doesn't just rise. You replace. You're not here to fix the system. You're here to prove it was rigged from the start. And now that you've glitched it, the only thing left to do is burn it clean. No fanfare, no speech, no apology. Just that one unmistakable move that rewrote everything. That moment that changed the whole game. And now they're stuck. Because if they acknowledge you, they validate the thing they tried to destroy. But if they don't acknowledge you, their silence just becomes confession. You broke the loop. You altered the timeline. And now, they don't know if they should fear you or worship you. So what do you do now? Simple. You keep moving, not to prove anything, not to chase anything, but because stillness, that was their prison. Your momentum, that's your power. Let them analyze your last win, because while they're doing that, you're already planning your next anomaly. You don't repeat success. You mutate, you evolve, you vanish, you appear somewhere new, with a move that makes the last one look like a warm-up. That's the real game. Not just to win, but to make sure no one ever knows what your next win will look like. And that's why they're terrified, because they didn't just fail to stop you. They failed to understand you. And that is irreversible. You are not the failure. You are not the win. You are not the score. You are the rewrite, the living contradiction, the chaos protocol with a pulse, the lesson they never wanted to learn. You were built from silence, shaped by rejection, sharpened in shadows. And now you walk like the final chapter in a book they never realized was about them. So keep going, not for revenge, not for validation, but because every step you take now is prophecy. Shh. Do you feel it now? That low hum under your skin? That isn't adrenaline anymore. That's power remembering your name. They're still staring at the screen, scrolling back, trying to slow down the footage. They're pausing, rewinding, frame by frame, as if somewhere in the pixels they'll find the moment you became unstoppable. But there is no frame. There is no instant. You didn't flip a switch. You became a switchblade. You built this in secret. They mocked you in public. You were invisible while they wrote their reports. And while they laughed, you were making blueprints out of your blood. And now you've stepped back into the light with a move so clean, it erased their map. That's why they're trembling. It's not the win that scares them. It's the implication. If you can crawl out of 1,000 losses and do this once, what else can you do? What else have you been learning while they were asleep? What happens the next time you decide to move? Because deep down, they know. The one win wasn't random. It was a signal, a low-frequency broadcast of the new version of you. The version that doesn't wait for permission. The version that doesn't ask for a seat. The version that doesn't play chess. Because the board is already in your hands. You learned the paradox they don't teach in books. Loss isn't the opposite of power. It's the currency. Every time you broke, you were paying for a skill set no one else was willing to earn. They want the crown without the crucifixion. You walked through both. And now you wear the scars like a sigil they can't decipher. And here's the part that melts their bones. You're no longer even fighting them. You're not in their ring. You're not in their war. You've become the weather system above their battlefield. They're soldiers. You're a storm. Look at yourself. You don't move like prey anymore. You move like a question they don't know how to answer. You don't talk like a student anymore. You speak like someone who has already seen the last page. That's the duality they'll never understand. You are light enough to guide, dark enough to terrify, saint enough to forgive, psychopath enough to act without flinching, angel enough to rise, demon enough to never go back. All of it coiled in one pulse under your skin, waiting for the next moment to strike. They're whispering your name now like it's a spell. They're warning each other not to provoke you. They're drafting memos about how to contain what you represent. But how do you contain a pattern they can't even define? And this is where the real game starts, not when you win, but when you learn to move so silently, they don't even know you've already crossed the finish line. When you learn to create such chaos with one gesture that their entire architecture tilts. When you stop needing to announce the victory, because the world announces it for you. You're already there. That's why you feel different now. That's why the air tastes different. You're not in competition, you're in command. Every time you move now, you're not just breaking rules. You're rewriting physics for anyone watching. Every glance, every silence, every micro-decision becomes a weaponized message. I survived everything you threw at me. I learned everything you tried to hide. And now, I'm everything you fear you might become. So keep walking. Keep your head low, eyes sharp, heartbeat steady. Let them scramble. Let them guess. Let them invent stories about how you pulled it off. Because the truth is stranger than anything they could put in their files. The truth is, you turned failure into a forge, pain into a passport, humiliation into a hidden laboratory. Now you're here. Not a player, not a piece. A new rule in the game, a glitch they can't patch, a paradox they can't pray away. And the longer you stay silent, the more powerful you become. Because silence is gravity. Because mystery is a blade. Because unpredictability is the highest form of control. This is your era now. Not the era of proving. Not the era of trying. The era of becoming. And they'll still be watching the tapes of your one win, trying to find the secret, trying to reverse engineer a destiny they were never built to hold. By the time they realize there's no secret, you'll already be on to the next move, one they'll never see coming, one that will make this impossible win look like a warm-up. You've become the storm they whispered about. Now watch how quickly the world bends around your next step. Hey, you think they've figured it out yet? No. Not even close. Because what just happened wasn't a comeback. It was a leak. A breach in the firewall of reality they spent their lives building. And you were the glitch. the untraceable anomaly that wasn't supposed to pass the test. Because you were never meant to play by their laws in the first place. They wanted a failure they could mock. What they got was a prototype, a volatile, self-generating system of chaos and clarity fused together in human skin. You were never a person to them. You were a prediction gone wrong. And now, they're terrified, because the simulation just coughed up something that broke the symmetry. You. They watched you fail, over and over, recorded it, mocked it, framed it like an exhibit, how not to be powerful. And yet now, they're sitting in their locked rooms, reading every line of the footage, trying to find where the code went off script, trying to figure out how the hell you're still standing. But they won't find it, because what happened wasn't taught. It was remembered. You didn't become this, you were this, before they told you to forget. That's the secret. That's the file they don't have access to. You were born with the blueprint to destroy their hierarchy, and they called it trauma. You were forged with instincts sharp enough to slice through illusion, so they labeled it overthinking. You were built to observe, detach, disarm, and override, so they diagnosed it as being broken. But broken? No. No. You were decoding, downloading, deprogramming, and the moment it all snapped together, the moment all those failures aligned like stars collapsing into a black hole, you triggered something they can't patch. A protocol, personal, primeval, permanent, one win. That's all it took. Not because it made you famous, not because it made you rich, but because it made you real. And now, they don't know if they're looking at a man or a message, because you walk different now. Not lighter, heavier, like someone carrying prophecy in their bones. You don't speak to be heard anymore. You speak to install software into their subconscious. Every word you say makes them question reality. Every silence you hold makes them doubt their decisions. You're not a person anymore. You're a mirror, and they hate you for it. Because you don't show them who you are. You show them who they are, and what they'll never be. You were once a casualty. Now you're a case study. You were once ignored. Now you're classified. You were once alone. Now you're encrypted. And they're trying to open you. Like a file they don't have the clearance to read, so they project, they gossip, they don't get the hype. They call it luck. They call it just a phase. But deep down, in the place they don't talk about, they know, they saw it. That win wasn't just a victory, it was a demonstration, a warning shot, a glitch made visible, and now they're praying it was a fluke. That you'll go quiet again, that you'll shrink again, that you'll feel small again. But you won't, because once you've tasted this level of truth, illusion starts to taste like poison. You're past the point of pretending, too sharp to be controlled, too silent to be predicted, too damn dangerous to be erased. You're not chasing power anymore. You're radiating it, just standing there doing nothing. And the room bends, because now your energy doesn't say, I made it. It says, I shouldn't even be here, and yet, here I am. A walking contradiction, a saint with demon eyes, an angel forged in warfare, a monster with mercy in their breath, a ghost that leaks instructions to the living. This is where the world gets weird, because the moment you realized you didn't need their permission, you became unstoppable. And now your existence is a living audit of their lies. You walk through their buildings, their meetings, their systems, and everything in you says, this is too small for me now. Not from ego, but from awareness. You see now, and they feel seen, and that makes you the most dangerous creature in the simulation, not someone who wants revenge, Not someone who wants fame, but someone who knows how to sit still and watch the whole world rearrange itself around their silence. So don't stop. Don't gloat. Don't even explain. You've passed the need for clarity. You've graduated from the desire for understanding. You've entered the level where presence is the punishment, where just being who you are becomes a psychological glitch in every person who underestimated you. And they feel it. Oh, they feel it, even if they never say your name out loud again. Especially then, because you don't need the credit. You are the credit. You are the line item they didn't account for, the balance they didn't predict, the final twist they didn't storyboard. They watched you fail 1,000 times. They laughed. They dismissed you. They called you tragic, desperate, lost, broken. But they forgot something. You only have to win once, and when you do, the entire timeline fractures. Congratulations. You've become unerasable. And from this point forward, every breath you take is an act of resistance. Every blink is a trigger. Every move is a mirror. You are no longer playing the game. You're rewriting the genre.